Very good morning to everyone today. Just to introduce myself briefly, I'm Carl Sizer. I sit on PwC's management board. I look after our regional practices across the UK, but also sponsor ESG from a UK management board perspective. So I'll be hosting today's audio event, and not actually myself at COP28, not this time around. I was up in Glasgow a couple of years ago, but I've joined by two guests on the ground in Dubai, Lynne Baber and Amal Larhlid. So before I continue, if you do prefer to have captions, please just click the three dots on the top right of the panel and select them there. LinkedIn have done a very good job actually of having really accurate captions for their live streams, although that could be famous last words, so I probably need to be careful making statements like that. Now let me just briefly go to my guest speakers and let them introduce themselves. So Lynne, to you first, please.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Great to be here. So I'm Lynne Baber, partner at PwC UK, lead our sustainability practice, and this is my first time on the ground at a COP.
Excellent, very good. And Amal, over to you.
Thank you, Carl. Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here. I'm a partner with PwC Middle East. I actually was with the UK firm for the last 10 years, but I moved 4 months ago to the region to lead our ESG efforts for TLS, and I'm also the EMEA sustainability leader for government and public sector. And of course, the weather is much better here, Carl.
Thanks, Amal. Just what I needed to hear on a very glum and dull day. So let's hope that's the last reference to it, Amal, please. So let's get into it. And before, though, we go into what is happening at COP28, I just wanted to go very briefly back to COP26, which obviously was hosted in Glasgow. And actually, when you think back to COP26 and the amount that has actually happened over 2 years, certainly I've seen and felt the shift and the change in terms of business engagement, in terms of various different things that are happening, various different pacts that have been signed, whether it be the Glasgow Climate Pact, and lots of discussion clearly in Egypt around loss and damages and financing for poorer countries. So a lot of things that have happened over that last 2 year period. Now, the backdrop of this particular COP, though, is a global stocktake, a moment for us where we can start to see that progress that's been made, but I guess start to really focus on that gap between ambition and reality. But let's start on a positive. I guess one of the things that has struck me is that actually I'm quite surprised to see, and we saw it actually in the very first day, a bit of progress being made early on in the summit around loss and damages and the loss and damages fund that people are contributing to. Maybe Lynne, could you just give me a little bit of colour around that and a bit of sharing of how that's landed in Dubai?
Yeah, happy to, Carl. So it's probably worth starting by a bit of a recap, actually, on what do we mean by the term loss and damage. So while climate mitigation seeks to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit future temperature rises, and climate adaptation refers to activities to reduce the impact of future temperature rises, loss and damage refers to the present day impacts of climate change. So, flooding from extreme weather events as one example. And actually, loss and damages, has received very little, if any, attention at previous COPs. So it really was a historic moment when parties agreed last year to set up a fund. It's still not smooth sailing necessarily for the fund, but we have, as you've said, had a promising start, positive news. And actually, we now have over $650 million pledged since the start of COP for this fund. Now, that is a really big number. It is worth remembering, though, the cost of loss and damage for developing countries is projected to reach $400 billion per year by 2030. And the rules mean all the contributions to the fund are voluntary. So there's no guarantee there will be sufficient finance, but want to remain positive. It has been a really promising start with a number of pledges, and we're not finished yet.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lynne. And you're right. It's a massive number, isn't it? But that 400 billion number really does demonstrate the scale of the challenge that we have ahead of us. But I have no doubt that gap will get closed further. So look, as I talked up front, there has been a lot of things that have emerged. One of the things that has struck me is actually how the topic has really broadened over the last 2 years. We had a lot of focus on carbon and climate it is now, I think that the narrative has broadened much more to things like water scarcity and to nature, and that sort of importance now of nature. And I know we recently released a nature strategy handbook. Again, Lynne, could you just share a bit of colour around that, what you're hearing about nature as a priority, certainly in terms of this COP as well?
Yeah, and you're right, Carl. It's definitely broadened in terms of the focus at COP, a lot around nature. Nature is actually mentioned as a priority in the COP28 presidency's action agenda. There's a whole thematic day this year dedicated to nature, so it really does show just how rapidly it's risen up the agenda. And there has been already great progress ahead of the specific Nature Day. We had on day 2, 134 world leaders, signed the COP28 UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action. So what does that mean in practice? Well, it will require countries to include emissions from food and agriculture in their national plans to tackle climate change before COP30 in Brazil, because there is such an inherent link between climate and nature. So you mentioned the strategy handbook. As part of It's Now for Nature, which is a specific campaign that we at PwC UK have been working with the Business for Nature Coalition on, we've created a nature strategy handbook that provides recommendations for all businesses, whether corporates, financial institutions, those just setting out on this journey, or those a little bit more mature, to set a forward-looking nature strategy. And it's a place where you can actually find useful tools and resources. It's a practical guide for taking that step to actually set a nature strategy. It's also been developed to align with all of the different nature-related frameworks, the regulations that are out in the market. So whether it's the European reporting regulations, CSRD, or the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures, if you look at this practical handbook, you can be confident it's also aligned with these frameworks that are out there. And hopefully everyone will find it a really useful practical guide. Now, Carl, I'm going to actually turn to you if I can. I've got a question for you, particularly as you were at COP26. I think when we look back to COP26, it was a real turning point for business engagement and the private sector kind of recognising and stepping up, right, in terms of the important role they have to play. We're definitely seeing high levels of engagement at this COP. It would be great, Carl, to know, well, what are you hearing from your clients at the moment in the UK whilst COP28 is going on? What's on their agenda? What are their concerns and priorities at the moment?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, as host, that's not normally allowed, Lynne, so I'll let you off. But I think
the rules.
Look, it's interesting, isn't it, as to when we were at COP26, actually it being in the country gave this extra level of engagement in the UK. I do think, and as much as I'm always glass half full rather than half empty, the fact it's in Dubai just changes the dynamic slightly. But what I do know, and having talked to my clients in the prep for this, I have a huge number of C-suite, CEO level people going over to Dubai and really engaging in the topic. I mean, I heard this is actually now the most attended COP of all that we have seen, 97,000 registered attendees actually going into the main events. So we're really seeing some great engagement, and a lot of that from business. Certainly when I talk to clients, so many different areas and issues for them to deal with. And I think part of the challenge for people right now is one of scale and complexity. As I'm talking to clients and as an audit partner, we talk a lot about the reporting agenda and that being a challenge that people know they have got to deal with. But reporting is not the end. Reporting is just the beginning. And so they're really seeing that actually, as they become more aware of the issues they have to deal with, the things they're going to have to fix in their supply chain, in their delivery, in their product creation, how they actually transition to a more carbon-friendly, water-friendly, nature-friendly way of delivering is really going up the agenda. And certainly across every audit or risk committee I join, climate is on every single one of the agendas. So it is definitely right up there in terms of priority. Now, Amal, turning to you and turning to businesses in the Middle East, you had a survey recently around a Green Deal for the region. Maybe you could just talk a bit about the results you saw from that.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Actually, the survey was a little bit broader and it asked questions about the ESG policies in the region. And the findings were really interesting because 64% of the respondents adopted ESG strategies, but they highlighted the need for green skills. So there is a shortage of in terms of green skills, whether it's in the region or beyond. The other interesting finding was actually around green finance. So 50% of respondents said that they don't really expect a lot of financial support in the implementation of their strategies and called for more green finance to be available. And the interesting thing there is that we have seen a number of pledges and commitments to green finance, but I think there is still a gap in knowledge. So just raising awareness of those pledges, but also in terms of implementation and how to turn those pledges into concrete action. And the third interesting finding was around the need for green policies and regulations. So as it stands, there is a fragmentation of policies that doesn't give businesses the clarity that they need around policy, around regulations, around taxes, and also the support available in terms of incentives. So 2 in every 5 respondents to the survey called for a comprehensive framework similar to the EU Green Deal or the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. And obviously the IRA committed to more than 360 billion for businesses and citizens to drive the green transition. So I think that there is a real need for a comprehensive and coherent framework also in the region.
Yeah, really helpful, Amal. And actually what strikes me, and I certainly see this in the UK and across EMEA as well, is that need for business and government to work collaboratively. What are you hoping to see come out of COP28, both in the UAE and hopefully globally on that particular agenda?
Well, I mean, similar to our businesses and our clients, I think that it would be really great to have at least a commitment to a comprehensive, coherent framework of policies and regulations. And as you said, Carl, it is really crucial to enhance that collaboration between businesses, governments, but also civil society that can play a really important role. And I think in terms of a global perspective, I'm hoping that we will see clear implementation plans for the pledges and the commitments that we have seen. So announcements are really important, but I think now we will need to turn those pledges and commitments into action.
Yeah, I love that point on the implementation plans. It's the thing that we always need, right? The commitments come, but the implementation plan is absolutely critical. But I think that point on collaboration is really important. Now, Lynne, we're obviously playing our part this year a bit in sponsoring the UK Pavilion. What are you hoping to see from this COP from a UK perspective in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say last 2 COPs, especially COP26, as you said, Carl, at the beginning, the UK really has been seen as a global leader on climate action. And look, my hope is that the UK can continue to be one of the most progressive voices on meaningful action to achieve net zero. And as Amal was talking about as well, actually, I think, for UK businesses, for investors, they need that policy certainty to have the confidence to invest in scale in decarbonisation. Time is now to push forward into action. And key for me in that, we'll also be seeing where the UK lands on the crucial debate in the negotiations on whether the final decision text should call upon countries to phase down or phase out fossil fuels. And that's obviously been a very hot topic, forgive me, in the last kind of couple of weeks as well, and in the build up to this COP.
Yeah, without doubt. And I think that is the thing that we're all sort of waiting to see over the next few days and probably a fair bit today, given the theme around energy and industry, which we'll come to in a second. Amal, you talked earlier just a bit about the sort of targets, the frameworks, the implementation plans. A lot of the focus, as you said, is on action and delivery. Guess one question is just around the finance climate commitments. What are you hearing around finance coming out of COP?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Really important question. And as you know, yesterday was Finance Day, so there was a lot of expectation in terms of what will come out of that day. And I think one of the main or the most important announcements we have seen is the COP28 UAE declaration on global climate finance framework. And I think, this declaration aims to make climate finance available, accessible, but also affordable, especially for the global south. And there are a number of measures that this declaration is actually bringing to the table, but I will just mention a couple that I think will have a huge impact. And the first one is the adoption of climate resilient debt clauses, or CRDCs. So these are actually really important, and the commitment was from financial institutions like the World Bank, the EBRD, the AFDB, but they were backed by 73 countries, and they have committed to expanding this mechanism in their lending practices. And basically, this practice will be like a game changer, allowing debt service to be paused when countries are hit by climate catastrophes. And that will provide them with more fiscal space that they need. And maybe three examples under this initiative. The UK announced the first ever climate resilient debt clause to Senegal, which is the first in Africa, but hopefully we will see more following. The second one is the IDB announced $1.2 billion of loans covered through the CRDCs. And the third is the World Bank will start offering this mechanism in existing loans, which will pose debt as well as interest for 2 years in the event of a natural disaster. So these are some really concrete measures that I think will make a difference and that will target countries that haven't contributed that much to global warming, given their stage of development, but they are hit harder if we look at creating that fairness globally. So I think these are really concrete measures.
That's brilliant, Amal. Thank you. Really good summary. And actually, the criticality of those commitments and then the following of the cash actually behind those commitments is going to be key. And it's great to see specifics around those examples. Now, I mentioned earlier that today's theme is energy and industry, and there's no doubt the energy transition and the phasing out or phasing down of fossil fuels has been high on the agenda all the way through over the last few days. So I guess maybe I'll come to you, Lynne, on this one. What are you expecting to see come out of this COP then on this particular point?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, Carl. So I'm hopeful we'll see the final text reference fossil fuels, which will actually be huge progress from COPs 26 and 27. But will it be phased down? Will it be phased out? That is really difficult to say, and I'm not going to place a bet, I'm afraid, today. And although, we do inevitably need an energy system which does move beyond reliance on fossil fuels, this transition must be managed in a just and fair way. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next few days what happens. Also today, what we see come out, given it is Energy and Industry Day. But whether I would land on phase down or phase out, I'm not going to say today, I think.
And there was me thinking you were more of a betting person than that, Lynne. Probably very much an unfair question. But maybe Amal, I'll come to you for the last question. Maybe it links a little bit to that point actually, and in part maybe it depends on where we get to. But we look back at COP26 at the start, and we said that we'd seen some great progress over the last 2 years in terms of at least prominence, maybe not quite in the same way on some of the other aspects. But if we go forward 2 years and we think to 2025, what do we think the legacy of this particular COP will be?
Yeah, I'm hoping, as I mentioned, Carl, to see more collaboration between countries, but also see more ownership from the global south in terms of the implementation of some initiatives. A lot of them are driven by the West, and I think we will need to bridge that gap between developing countries and the developed world. So I'm hoping to see more ownership, but also some concrete results that are coming out of the announcements and the commitments that we have seen at COP28.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Amal. And I think, if we can have that as the legacy. And I do think, and I started with me being a glass half full kind of person. I do think actually I would say we've seen more coming out of this COP already than I thought would have happened. At this point in time, it does feel like there's good commitment and engagement, and let's hope that carries on over the next few days. Now, thank you all very much for joining today's live stream, and thank you very much for Lynne and Amal for joining from Dubai. However depressed that has now made me for the rest of this week. I hope everyone enjoyed today's conversation, and if you missed part of it or others want to listen again, the recording will be on our PwC UK YouTube page very shortly. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.